Hello and good afternoon. Welcome to Legal Candy, where today's episode we are going to be talking about Trump's financial turmoil just a little bit because it just happened. And then we're also going to be going back to where we talked about Gypsy Rose and unraveling the appeal that is currently taking place in regards to Nicholas Godejohn, the actual man who committed the murder. To introduce myself again, I am attorney Candace Colucci. Greetings, everybody. Thank you for joining us as we today embark on this double feature, diving into the saga of Gypsy Rose, talking about Nicholas Godejohn. And we do have a couple guests on our show. As you guys know, Mary Catherine, who's in our background most of the time, helping us with content. Thank you, Mary Catherine. And we also have a special guest today because we are going to be talking in kind of detail about the trial of what took place with Nicholas Godejohn. And so we've got Kelly Berg here from the Colucci Law Group. And Kelly Berg is a senior litigation registered paralegal. She is a Florida registered paralegal. Thank you for being here, Kelly.
Thank you, Candace.
And so Kelly's specialty as a paralegal, some people don't really know the difference, but there are different types of attorneys. There are really kind of litigating attorneys. And so those are attorneys that go to trial. They are trial litigation attorneys. They file documents with the court and they push through a document all the way potentially to go to a jury trial or a judge trial. And the paralegals who are working for them are usually considered litigation paralegals, right?
Yes.
Yes. And then you've got attorneys who are more transactional attorneys who will never go to trial, don't litigate. And so they usually have paralegals also, and they are usually not trial litigating paralegals. And so do you enjoy being a litigation paralegal?
I do. I love the highs and lows, and I love the wins.
You do. You love the wins. So Kelly gets to see it all. She gets to see with our area of practice when we are just fighting it out with the insurance companies. And that's what we do on a daily basis. We are constantly suing insurance companies for their failure to pay adequate property damage claims. That's one of the areas we specialize in. We also do personal injury. So when in those cases, we are suing the insurance company when they fail to pay enough for their damage. So it all comes down to money, money, money. If you don't get your money to go back to the way you were before, you will come to us and then we sue insurance companies. But Kelly, wasn't there a time when you weren't suing insurance companies?
There was. Yeah. There was a time when I actually did work for the insurance companies.
You did. And so I remember when she came in for the interview and I'm like, I get it. You're doing it for a job. But I was like trying to convince her. I'm like, listen, you're coming over to the good side, the light side. I was like, you're going to be able to use everything you learned and we're going to be able to use it to help other people. And you've really been able to do that, right?
I have.
You have.
And I've had a couple of huge wins.
Yes.
That I'm very, very proud of.
Yes. She is she's definitely feeling it. And we've been able to really utilize that knowledge. I mean, it's been very helpful to us as a firm, but it's been so helpful to the people who were the victims of the sometimes nefarious behavior of the insurance company. So she was able to give us some of those secret nuggets that she's learned along the way. And we are very thankful for that. And so are our clients. Okay, so with that, we go head to head with insurance companies. We also are constantly litigating. We've got other areas of law that we do too. So we're going to be talking about some of the legalities of what took place with Gypsy Rose. So quickly to talk about Trump. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's like every time you turn around, there is a Trump trial that is happening somewhere. And I don't think people can even keep up at this time. I don't think a regular person on the street would even know how many different things have been levied, criminal allegations, criminal charges, civil charges. And I think we're going to do an episode where we really try to go over that. Our goal here on this show is to educate people in the best way that we see fit, to give them knowledge that kind of allows them to take a position one way or the other with more facts is really what we're trying to do. So that with a legal disclaimer, I'll let you guys know nothing we say here today is going to create an attorney-client privilege. If you have any questions, any legal questions you need to ask or anything at all, you can reach out to a qualified attorney, or also we are qualified attorneys. You can reach out to our office at 727-733-9438. If we can't help you with your problems, we will help to put you in the right direction. And also, our email address is office@Colucci, COLUCCI, law group, all one word, .com. So please just reach out. So talking about some of the stuff that we're seeing is we're definitely going to try to do a full episode of just talking about the legal cases against Trump at this point in time to kind of help analyze it. But the most recent one is we've got a civil fraud ruling out of New York City. And we've talked before about the difference between criminal and civil. So these allegations of fraud are right now in civil court. So in New York, the charges are civil, and now he has been found liable for financial fraud. And what they are saying, and well, now he's been found guilty of it, but what the court has said is that when Trump and his team were out looking for loans, they were over-exaggerating the property values in order to get these loans. And now he has been found financially liable for, it's like $354 million is the fine. And with interest that continues to rise, we're at $450 million, and it seems to be going up every single day as there's interest that continues to occur every single day that you don't pay this
$100,000.
$100,000 a day, if you can imagine. $100,000 a day. So I definitely want to take the time to kind of unravel that to a higher degree, because fraud's always been one of those interesting things that I learned about, not from just a criminal perspective, but definitely from a civil perspective, when you learn how low the standard can be. So in order to commit a fraud, it has to be a misstatement of the facts, that somebody relies upon them to their detriment. And it can sometimes be an unknowing. You have to, you're intentionally giving the fact, but if, let's say someone gave it to you and you maybe weren't really sure if it's true or not, if you turn around and give it to somebody else as fact, even if it happens to be wrong, and they rely upon it to their detriment, then that's fraud. So we will definitely go over that. We'll let everybody know when we do that episode where we really will unravel all of the things that are happening against Trump legally and what that looks like. And what does that mean, right? So he is now, what'd you say before we came in, Kelly, that after all this, he's still what? The front runner?
Still the front runner of the Republican Party.
Of the Republican Party, yes. And we are just living in very, very interesting times right now. I mean, I think there is yes, when you've been a president and now you're running again, and there's definitely a lot of people don't want you running, it seems to be that there's this insane bright light being put on him that we've kind of never seen before. I think it's the brightest it's ever been. Mm-hmm. And it's got the most resources you've ever seen, really trying to figure out every single thing that has happened. Because with this instance, I mean, I can't wait to delve in it myself to be able to talk about it to you guys. But with something like this, it's very common. I mean, I'll give you an example. How many times have you went to see a home that is for sale and the person tells you how much they want for it, and you look at them like they've lost their mind, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's not because they're trying to fraud you. It's because it's a subjective. It really is. At the end of the day, the value of something is sometimes based on what somebody's willing to pay for it, or right, what someone's willing to finance it at. So to me, I'm interested in really just open this up, because goodness gracious, everything has this level when you're looking at the value of a property. Is that property worth $500,000? You know, is it worth $500,000? And they may tell you, yeah, I believe it's worth $500,000. I have these upgrades. I have this. I have that done. My view is the best view on the block, all this other stuff. And then literally you can go to the bank and try to get it refinanced. And they're like, this is not how much it's worth. Like, no way. It doesn't mean you're necessarily lying about it. It just means there's other factors you may not have taken into consideration. Or when I go to buy it, I may say, there's no way I'm paying that. And the market crashes and now all of a sudden it's worth $200,000. So So I'm excited about kind of unraveling that for everybody so we can understand kind of more about what's really taking place legally against Trump. So now let's talk about Miss Gypsy Rose. Okay. So we talked about Gypsy in some good amount of depth last time that we 2 weeks ago or something we were going through Gypsy Rose because she has just been released from serving. What was it? 8 years she served.
8 out of the 10.
8 out of the 10. 8 years. 8 years. Absolutely. So she gets released 8 years. It is all over the news. She has been on so many different TikTok shows. I mean, every time you turn around, there is something that she is on and being seen as like a celebrity. And so that has been definitely very controversial because just a little brief information of kind of by way of background is that Gypsy Rose was convicted of second-degree murder for the death of her mother, Dee Dee Blanchard. And the allegations that were, well, at this point now all considered as being all proven is that Gypsy Rose was a young woman who was the victim of Munchausen syndrome, where her mother was creating all of these illnesses that didn't exist for years to probably, if somebody ripped it apart, they can probably say it's probably one of the biggest charity frauds as far as I think emotional connection. I mean, not so much financial. She did get a lot of money, but she created all these different illnesses for her daughter that didn't exist. So she said she had cancer. She said she had MS. She says that she had autism. She said she was severely had low IQ. Couldn't make this. That there was a bunch of different things that she was deaf. She could barely hear. She could barely see. All these different things to where because of what the attention that comes from that, from people out in the public, from her. And I just heard somebody talk about Munchausen syndrome. And one of the things that the therapist was talking about is that some parents do it for the need of wanting to still be needed, right? Because you are this mother and then all of a sudden your child becomes capable of taking care of themselves, when some moms are like, thanks, I've been waiting for this day. You can put your pants on by yourself. Like, now you can feed yourself. I'm not going to make you dinner anymore. Like, most parents are like, this is amazing. But then there are parents who don't want to ever leave that. And so she would have been okay with doing that forever. And then now she starts creating these symptoms that are not there and starting convincing doctors to believe that they exist.
Well, she even went so far as to have Gypsy's salivary glands removed.
Oh, God.
To enhance her drooling.
Yeah.
The stuff that the doctors were allowing, I think, came massively from the believability of the mother and all of the other factors that she put into play physically to her, right? She shaved her head, shaved her little daughter's head. Her teeth start falling off because she's giving her medication she doesn't need. She forces her to stay in a wheelchair even though that she can walk. So all of these things put together, doctors really weren't questioning. They started believing this woman and were doing surgeries based on what the mother was saying. So we're going to go to our first break. When we get back, we'll talk a little bit more about what took place and really talk about now how the actual man who stabbed the mother, Dee Dee, 17 times is trying to get an appeal going to be now retried because he believed he did not get a fair chance the first go around.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
I don't have the freaking timer.
Did you press record on StreamYard?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Perfect. Okay.
Clip. Gypsy's phone. TV's bed. The stabbing. Okay, every single one of these.
She was what, 23 or something?
Yeah.
They excel in delivering exceptional
But she still looked like a child.
animal contracting services.
She also wasn't even, she even considered other methods of murdering her mom.
Yeah,
She's like,
poison.
I saw the
arson, murder. It's, yeah. I totally agree with what you said. She should get more time, and he should,
Great price, expert service, Coastal Roofing, 1-800-674-3675. This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Welcome back to Legal Candy. And so we will continue talking about Gypsy Rose. So at the very end of it, she is being forced to stay in a wheelchair. And then as it kind of starts to grow, you can hear the daughter, when she ends up testifying, Gypsy Rhoda is saying that her mother was also abusing her. She was keeping her locked up in a little bedroom with nothing in it. She would starve her, so she would look frail and little. If you've seen the pictures of this girl, Gypsy Rose, you believe every single word of what's being said, because you can physically see that this girl is being emancipated. I mean, she's literally like just sunken in her face and her body. And so it's very, very traumatizing. I heard another expert say that the health system failed this girl, because if anybody had done the right searches and listened, I think there was along the ways they found out there is someone who puts a report in. There's a couple different reports that are made that were ignored about Gypsy potentially being abused. No one ever looked into it. And then also there was one doctor who thought that maybe there was Munchausen syndrome happening, and nobody ever looked into it. That it could have maybe not got to the level to where Gypsy Rose believed 100% that there was no way for her to ever escape her mother and be with this kid, Nick Godejohn, that she meets on a Christian mingle site, a free Christian website. She made very clear when she was testifying, and falls in love with him and then wants to be with him. And her mother has made it clear she's never letting her go. And I think when you look at it now, you do know that's true. Her mother would have never let her go, because she was already 23 at the time, and her mother wouldn't let her leave. She had been lying about her age. She changed her birth certificate so she would look younger, so she would get more benefits. They got benefits all over the place. They had every single type of charity benefit, from Habitat for Humanity, who builds homes for people who are having financial problems, health problems. It's an amazing organization, and they do a lot of hurricane recovery and hurricane work afterwards. We adore the work that they do. And so they built a house, all the way to a whole house was being built and given to her, all based on all of the allegations she had said her daughter had that she truly didn't have. And so Gypsy meets Nick Godejohn online, and they believe that they begin this relationship that I think lasts for about 2 years. And even when the trial is going forward against Nick Godejohn, you start seeing all the evidence. And I'm sure you guys were seeing some of the text messages. I don't know if you guys read those, the text messages with them back and forth. And some of the things that Nick Godejohn, it's very clear. We know that he has been diagnosed with autism. You can tell by the way he communicates. You can see him in his interview afterwards. It is very clear that there is something, he's not all together. And I think everybody seems to understand that was very factual and true. What he says also is that he has multi-personality disorder. He says that. There is no expert who testifies to it, but it does seem that there's definitely several personalities that are happening in some of the communications between him and Gypsy before he was convicted of this. So
don't you think that aspect should have been explored before trial?
It should have been massively explored. I will talk about some of those issues, but absolutely the mental capacity of a defendant to commit a crime is very, very relevant and very important. And you need all of the experts you can get to analyze them, to tell you what are the things that this person is suffering from. Because as we talked about before, is that in order to be held liable, or to be held liable to the highest extent, you have to have the mental capacity to have known what you were doing, at least understand the consequences of the actions when you committed the crime. And even if it's not all the way to that high level, even a lower level makes you less culpable of the crime, which means you'll usually get mitigating factors, less sentences, a mitigating charge, a lower charge. And so that was a huge issue in this case, because it ends up being their defense, but they don't really have it well documented defense with this way. That becomes the issue on appeal. So she says that she convinces Nick Godejohn to commit this crime, and she says, it's the only way we're going to be able to be together. And so she sets it up, she puts the plan together, and then he actually is the one who comes into her home around 3 a.m. in the morning, and then he stabs her mother 17 times to where, they said it was absolutely a horrible crime scene. And then they try to flee, they get in trouble, and then he ultimately gets arrested. And he and when he's being asked the questions, you can tell he has no intention of lying. He doesn't lie at all. Everything he says is very matter of fact, has a lot to do with the autism side of it. Deep, complex thinking for him is not something he was capable of doing. To come up with some massive, elaborate plan of what he was going to do to try to make it look like they hadn't committed this crime was nothing that was going to be something in his mind. He answered every question very, very honestly, and you could tell that very awkwardly that you knew something, that he had definitely a reduced capacity of knowledge, of communication skills too, is how he was communicating. So here's what happened when we were talking about that. People sometimes don't get confused. Is that what took place with Gypsy Rose is? Gypsy Rose did not go to a jury trial. People don't realize that. They're like, how did this girl get 10 years, and all that stuff? It didn't happen like that. They both were charged for first-degree murder, both of them, and that's what happened. So every single state does this, at least routinely, is that. If you convince somebody else to commit a murder, and now that it's being seen as happening a lot more, is that you can be charged with the exact same crime they are on first-degree murder. And so that's people says, sometimes people don't think that. And now we're seeing it more because it's becoming, unfortunately, more popularized, like people are talking about it. But so she was also charged with murder. She also was part of the plan, plotting, all of that kind of stuff. But even if she had just convinced him and she never even showed up there and did nothing else, she can still be held responsible, criminally responsible. So she gets charged, he gets charged. And now they're trying to figure out what really took place. What happens? They charge you and then they try to put all the facts together. When they started researching, I think that right away, when they started going into her background and figuring out what happened, I can't help but think that the system felt very responsible. That's why I think that they were so willing to give her such a reduced sentence, because there is no rhyme or reason. There has been situations that are similar where people are sitting in jail for life who've done some things that are similar to this, to get away from abusive relationships, to get away from a parent who you think was abusing you, those kind of things. This is not the first time this has happened.
Everybody failed her.
Yeah. Everybody around, I think everywhere. Absolutely. Because some of the things that they were treating her for were very clearly to be shown in a test if someone had done the right testing for her. And so it definitely is really sad. And I think that's why. So what happens is that once the state attorney starts to review the case and she gets an attorney, she's been charged with murder, they realize that they do believe that there was definitely abuse coming from the mother. They were just like, that's what's happening here. I mean, we have a Munchausen syndrome, but she also did convince this kid to do this. But here's what people don't really get is there hasn't been a trial. So all of the evidence and all the facts are not out yet. That happens through the discovery process as you're getting close to trial. Most of the time, charges are levied against you, and then that opens the door to now you being able to figure out what really took place. Mm-hmm. So in this instance, at that point in time, they didn't know the very details of what took place step by step by step. I don't think that it was not that ironed out for them. And so once they started really figuring out, getting medical records, getting health records, interviewing family members, friends, that's stuff that the state attorneys will start doing to really figure out, what do we think we're dealing here with that we feel comfortable as a resolution for Gypsy Rose? Because then her attorney will start making offers to them. So she took a plea deal with the state attorneys she pled guilty to second-degree murder, and then they gave her the 10 years. So, and they could have given her all the way up to, I think their second-degree murder, I think, goes up to 25 years. If not, potentially, I think goes up to life. So they could have given her much more than that. They decided that 10 years they felt was sufficient for her role in it. Now, what ends up happening afterwards is then Nick Godejohn has to take this. He decides he's going to take the stand. And he has an opportunity potentially to try to make plea deals with the state attorneys, but I doubt they were going to make any plea deal that wasn't first-degree murder that would have came with at least 25 years to life as a sentence.
I believe he changed his mind at the last minute.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. He wasn't even sure about that. He was so confused.
Yeah. I think he's not all there. I mean, imagine, and that's the crazy part is, For an attorney to defend somebody of this caliber who's got diagnoses with severe autism, that has a hard time contemplating, understanding complex issues, which is what they're saying some of the diagnosis and some of those symptoms are, how can he ever participate in his own defense? And that is so important as an attorney, is that my job as an attorney is to lead you and to give you advice and to support you through the process. But it's your responsibility as the client to really kind of direct me, right? So I'm going to be the one in front, but you're the one in back going, hey, I want to go to trial. So that's why I'm leading us to trial, but it's really your decisions on where I'm going. So it's really important that your client has the capacity to make those decisions. And there's no way that he was able to make decisions about, should I testify? Should I not testify? I couldn't imagine him being able to do that. But that's just from what I'm seeing of some of the analysis when I watched his confession tape. But so he goes on trial for this murder, and his defense is that he just had and it's not, the thing is that people also, we've talked about it a little bit, is that if you believe that he wasn't fully competent to stand trial, that's a whole different process. So that would have been an entire, before you even get to trial, we have to prove, if we believe that you're going to plead the insanity plea, people talk about it a lot. In most states, they're going to make you have to plead that before you even go to trial. So to see if there's enough evidence that you are even capable of going forward and having representation. So in this instance, the defense was really just that he had a diminished capacity. And that was really their defense, was that he wasn't able to craft this whole entire murder. It was really her idea, all of these kind of things. But all that really would have done would have been to get him a lesser sentence. It wouldn't have gotten him a not guilty. That's not it. So really is just to try to get him. He's not saying I didn't commit the crime, then I'm not guilty of it. He's saying I'm not really guilty of the highest degree, which first degree murder requires contemplation, premeditation, those kind of things. So he's trying to stay away from the first degree murder, which is why sometimes people go to trial. People think, well, if you go to trial, it must mean that you believe that you're not guilty. That's not true. Sometimes people go to trial to try to get a lesser charge, because when you get charged with something in most states, you can also be charged with lesser crimes, like lesser included crimes, which means anything underneath that, like a lower culpability crime. So you can now have an opportunity for a jury to come back and go, well, I don't think he's guilty of first degree murder, but I do think he's guilty of second degree murder, because first degree murder required that you had thought about it before, plotted it, planned it. Second degree murder usually means the heat of the moment, and it comes with a lesser penalty. So there are sometimes that people go, where the state attorney is going, no, I believe you premeditated this. We charge you with first degree murder, and your defense is, I didn't premeditate it. Yes, I murdered him, but it was in the heat of the moment, all of those things, and you could still go to trial and come back with second degree murder, and now you're having a less sentence. So in this instance, that's pretty much what he was doing. And so, yes, he goes to trial, and during that trial is when she takes the stand. Gypsy Rose really takes the stand, and she really goes into that fact that she loved him. There was this relationship, that he has multiple personalities, that she role played with him to meet his personalities, different personalities, that it was her plan. She convinced him. She told him about it. I mean, she's telling everything because she cannot be now tried again, not double jeopardy. She's already taken a plea. It's already done. So she can say everything. She even talks about she stole the weapon from Walmart. And so she admits to everything and really says this was all my plan, my plotting, and was not his idea. And I told him, that this is what needed to happen because my mom is abusing me and she's never going to let me be with you. Or she's never going to let me leave. And so,
don't you think that the district attorney's office actually went for the soft target, the one they knew they would get a conviction?
So it's not necessarily the soft target. I mean, they definitely knew. I mean, they knew they were going to get a conviction because the evidence was everywhere. They knew they were going to get a conviction. I just really think that that's usually what happens. One of them will usually, the person who told the person to commit the crime is usually the one who rats the other one out. So a lot of times that's just normal for the state attorney to give a lesser sentence to the person who convinced them to do it. And I honestly think, depending on the level of convincing someone to do it to a certain degree, I don't know why they shouldn't have the same exact crime. I've always thought that when I've seen it. I'm like, some of these where it is so overpowering that love what you say, because here's the question is, if Nick Godejohn had never met Gypsy Rose, would he have killed anybody? I mean, and the answer is we're not 100% sure, but I can probably tell you more than likely, no. Gypsy Rose was very smart, come to find out, right? We know now she is very smart. And when I watched her on that stand, so she took the stand in Nicholas Godejohn's case, and she explained her mother's murder. And I'm not in her shoes, so I can't tell you, but she didn't seem emotionally affected by it, didn't seem the tears. And even people who are abused by their parent, physically abused by their parent as a child, they still usually love their parent because they don't know any different and have some type of emotion. But then I think I haven't been in that situation, so I think I learned a lot from it, because I'm trying to understand where she's coming from, how there's no emotion attached to it. And I'm thinking, God, she probably started putting together, and especially now she's testifying, that her mother was killing her, was taking her life away from her. I think by the time she testified, she's a completely different person than she was when the crime was committed. Now she's really learning. She said she didn't realize the extent of her abilities. She didn't realize the extent of her physical abilities until she was at the actual police station, when she first was like, they were like, do you need the wheelchair? And she's like, I don't think so. No, because she didn't have the freedom to even try to walk around and run around and do these things. But at the police stations where she really got to do it. So she really realized, I think, how abused she was. So maybe that's why she takes the stand and she doesn't have that emotional connection to it. But she was very much she articulated herself well and was very smart by all, intents and purposes. And so I just think in this instance, I understand why Gypsy Rose got the sentence that she did, was because of the abuse she had suffered. But I think in a general situation, if it hadn't been abused, I think when you're convincing someone to commit a crime, a lot of times you should be sitting in the same sentence, in the same place as them, especially in this instance where he had a low capacity. He really was trusting what she's saying, I think, and doing what she wanted him to do. So he's found guilty. They come back and they say the jury is not buying anything. They say first-degree murder all the way. He knowingly plotted this murder, planned this murder, did this murder, and should be held liable for the crime. Now he has filed an appeal. Kelly, you read some of that appeal stuff?
I did. I have read some of it, and it's really glaringly bad.
Yeah. Right? Okay. Well, let's go into some of the issues that are on appeal and what does it mean to appeal your sentence right after this break.
This is the Tan Talk
For first-degree murder, do you have to contemplate it with cool reflection? Does it have to be contemplated with cool reflection?
So the use, so
Okay.
it depends on where you're at, but most of them, like Florida.
That was introduced, though, in the appeal. And he was like, how can an autistic person possibly, through the lens of an
100%.
autistic person, could that be one? No, it could not.
Yeah.
And they didn't have any other witnesses. They only had one. They didn't have any family members. They didn't get his records from the jail.
He only had one witness.
Yeah, like you read all this. Like he only had one witness to attest to his autism.
Yes, it was to his autism. Yeah.
He didn't have any family members.
And they said that he wasn't.
Records from Waseca County Jail, including the mental evaluation. The pretrial publicity was everywhere. The HBO show, Dr. Phil. You know what I mean? There was no thought for a change of venue. There was no motion for that.
This is the Tan Talk Radio Network.
Because he wanted to be a gypsy.
Welcome back to Legal Candy. So we're talking about Nick Godejohn, and so you were talking about the appeal. So you're reading some of the appeal, and so now Nick Godejohn has filed an appeal, which means he believes that the trial that took place against him violated in some way his constitutional rights, and therefore he should get another opportunity to have another trial, is usually the basis of an appeal. And appeals are not automatic. You've got to file them. You have to have an attorney who specializes in it in order to review all the evidence to see if they think it's appealable. And so he has filed an appeal. And so what were some of the information that you had seen when you were looking over?
The
That was
biggest
interesting.
thing about it is that everybody seemed to know that he had a developmental disability, but nobody bothered exploring that, getting the evidence, none of that. They just kind of all let it go, or in my opinion, they just said, oh, they'll figure it out.
Yep. So, and that's based on one of the grounds for an appeal in his case specifically is that he believes he had poor representation. He had ineffective assistance of counsel. So you have a constitutional right to have effective assistance of counsel, and that is an attorney. So when that's why if you've ever been arrested or ever heard, when they tell you your rights, the right to remain silent, your right to an attorney, like they're telling you what your rights are, that you've got these rights. And one of them is to an attorney. And that's why in a criminal case, it's only in criminal cases. In civil cases, you don't have the right to an attorney, which means the state doesn't have to provide you one if you don't have one. You're gonna have to pay for one, or unfortunately represent yourself or go to legal aid. But in a criminal case, if you cannot represent yourself and you can't afford an attorney, the state will provide one for you because you have that constitutional right, not just to have a body there, but for them to be competent and to provide adequate representation. That's what your right, that's what your constitutional rights are. Now, the question is, what does that mean, right? Like, what does that mean when those words are saying if they need to be a competent attorney with adequate representation? There is no white and black. Like, it's not. It really is very, very gray of what that is. What the standard is of what an attorney is supposed to do can change all the time based on just what experts got together and thought, well, an attorney should do this in this situation, or they should do that. Attorneys do different things all the time. So to really win something like that against an attorney, you're going to have to show that the attorney should have done something that they didn't do. That's the first thing you have to show in this appeal, that they should have done something that they shouldn't do, which is sometimes a gray area. But then in order to get a new trial, you have to then show that had that attorney done what they were supposed to do, there would have been a potentially other results sometimes. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be kind of shown there that has to matter. So in this instance, what he's saying is this attorney should have done certain things for me. And that was one of the things you were talking about, is that really delving into the defense, which would have been his defense of reduced capacity.
Well, attorneys
really
are
go
supposed
into
to, zealously defend their client. And there was no zealous in this defense at all.
That really is what they were unraveling there in this appeal is really where they're at, is really going, there are things he should have done. So the allegations were he should have filed to move for a change of venue. We've talked about the change of venue. They were in this small town where literally the entire thing was very, very publicized in that area. It became national news, huge news. But that family also was kind of it was in the news before when she first got her house. They'd been in the news. People knew kind of about them. And then afterwards, definitely everybody knew. So it could affect his right to a fair trial if everybody in that area knows and are so against the fact that this murder took place. And they've got so much information that they already know that now can make it to where he's not getting a fair trial, that they're coming in with information they're not getting from the trial, which we talked about. Those rules of evidence means that they could have information that they're relying upon that should have never been told to them.
Well, Dee Dee Blanchard was a hero.
Yeah. Yep. In that area. So I get it. But the question is, would the motion to move the venue have mattered? And does an attorney, do they have to do that? And you don't. Sometimes the choice may be, he may have thought, listen, if we tell them who Dee Dee Blanchard really was, so you just said she's a hero, right? So maybe if you really felt that and you were like, and you decide as an attorney, you're not going to move for a change of venue because you don't think it's going to work. But you may also say, listen, I think it's better that they know her. And then we educate the jury that she wasn't this hero. Here are the things, here's what you didn't know, which they could have done that on their defense.
Mhm.
And then have said, and so the only way out for her daughter, who was also a member of your community, who also was failed by this community, right? She had to do these things. And he, the person on trial, Nick Godejohn, is in some form or fashion saving Gypsy's life. That could have been the defense, right?
Well, the change of venue would have taken emotion out.
Yeah.
And it would have been facts only.
Yep.
So the change of venue probably should have happened.
And what I'm saying, that could be, but let's just say that his defense was what I was saying. Then you wouldn't need that change of motion. He may say, what if his attorney really thought, this is where I want to try this case because that's going to be my defense instead of it. It may be a better defense to do it in this community that has failed her, that may feel sympathetic to her and him.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm saying is that, so it is hard to say. You may say that he should have filed it. I may say he didn't need to file it. Is that an effective assistance of counsel? It really comes down to another jury or whatever if they have their bar association, they can maybe say, this attorney, we believe with all of these facts, they may agree with you. He should have filed it. But that's what I'm saying. It's so gray on that. What is an effective assistance of counsel? Should he have done these kind of different things? I do think that one of the other allegations that had a lot of backing for me was that there was one expert he called who testified to the mental capacity of Nick Godejohn, but it seemed like, so what ended up taking is that the state had rejected this expert because they believed he had lack of experience with autistic patients. And so at the end of the day, one of the allegations is that Nick Godejohn's attorney should have gotten a different expert. He should have went and got a different expert who had better qualification.
A neuropsychologist.
Yeah, a neuropsychologist or someone along those lines who could have testified with the right qualifications in order to be seen credible to a jury that he really did potentially have all these other ailments, bringing in people from his childhood, his teachers, those kind of things. I tried a case one time with diminished capacity, and that is exactly what we brought in. His school records. We brought in a specialist who analyzed him one time when he was younger. And so we started bringing as many people as we can, not just family members, but also people who knew him, teachers, to really paint that picture of what we thought this person's capacity was. So those are some of the grounds for the appeal that are taking place. What else did you find interesting when you were looking through some of that appeal stuff? Interesting.
Just that the defense attorney never got his jail records, and there was a mental evaluation in it.
Yep.
There was, and he heard voices. The record states that Godejohn was receiving federal benefits for illness. He continues to say that Godejohn had thoughts of suicide, and he only did what he did because of Gypsy. I mean, over and over, he says that showing remorse, and none of this was shown. None of this was admitted either.
Yep. And so that could be something that's clear, that it could be determined that is an effective assistance of counsel. One of the things that usually is more black and white is, did you fail to get evidence that you knew existed or should have known existed? And one of the things would absolutely be medical records or the records from when they're in jail. You want to see what those notes are. If he's saying he has multiple personalities, has anybody else complained about it? It was something that they evaluated for him there. Was he going into the medical unit? Those are things that, absolutely, a failure to get those records could lead to something where we're saying, hey, that was ineffective, because those would have been potentially very helpful to the jury to hear.
And I just think that's interesting because he did have the two distinct personalities. One, as he said, was the good one, and one was the bad one. One was the bad one that could commit, he believed he was a 500-year-old vampire. And he was the one that Gypsy deliberately evoked and asked to commit this murder.
Oh yeah, so we're looking at some of those facts. Yep, about the fact that if his allegation was that he had these separate personalities, and that he was saying that Gypsy was very aware of them, would talk differently to him, which we know. We've seen some of the photos. She'll wear different photos when she's interacting with the right personality, and that based on the testimony of her and of what we've kind of unraveled is that she specifically requested that certain personality that he had that could be the one who would be the one committing the murder in order to do the murder. I mean,
she had been manipulated her whole life.
Yeah. I mean, she had been with a master manipulator. Like,
so
the top of the line.
In my opinion, she became a master manipulator.
Yeah. It's exactly what it looks like, is that someone who is abused potentially went, I don't want to say potentially went on to abuse someone else, but I think someone who's abused in a way that learned those poor, just horrific personality traits of how to speak to people. I even think her voice, I think her mom's voice, I think that we've heard someone talk about that her mom came across that way too. Very nice, very like just believable. And when you hear Gypsy Rose and she has this little teeny voice and the way she comes across, I mean, you just want to love her when she's talking. You're going, oh my gosh, like I want to protect you. And I think that she probably picked up a lot of personality traits from her mom in order to potentially utilize that.
She probably needed them to survive.
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, they were constantly convincing people. Her mom was telling her, you've got to act this way. You've got to act this way. Don't seem confused. I mean, she's been acting since she was little. Mm-hmm. And that's what people are saying. That's what people are questioning. Should she be out? Should she have spent more time because she was more culpable? Is she really this victim? Was a question that I think we talked about before. And I think this is one of those really, really unfortunate situations. Murder is never, ever justified or okay in a way if someone is not physically harming you or puts you in reasonable fear of imminent death. And I think here is one of the cases where we see that new line of we used to think self-defense was somebody was right in front of you with a gun. Mm-hmm. And I think that what you're seeing here is the other option of when your self-defense is not in that exact moment. At the time when they murdered her mother, she wasn't at that exact moment abusing the daughter, but she had been, she would have continued. And I do believe that Gypsy Rose's life was in danger at that point. I mean, how many more medical procedures were people going to do on this girl that didn't actually have these illnesses? And I don't even know how much research anyone's really done, because I think everybody wanted it to go away. That's why I think the state attorney gave her less sentence. I think everybody was just like hoping nobody's going to look into what took place to this girl in our medical facilities. Could you imagine that? Like, imagine that part of it. And I don't know if anyone is looking into it, but looking into the entire medical records of how many doctors allowed things to happen to this girl that were not needed.
Well, and if she'd have been tried, all of those doctors, all of
Everyone
those would have been on the stand.
Yep. Every single one of them would have, most of them, whoever they called, really. But yes, I think, that would have been their defense. They knew that. They knew that if her defense would have been, in essence, this self-defense idea that this abuse, just like, people who are being physically abused daily, she says physical abuse, but also the other abuse she was getting was harming her, whether her mother was touching her or not, because of the actions of her mother. And we saw another Munchausen syndrome case where it was horrible, where the mother had been poisoning the son for, as they think the attention, all other stuff. And then how they caught her is they caught her on video camera. There was a video camera inside of the hospital room. And at some point in time, she injects saltwater into her son's feeding tube. The tube that he had. And he ends up going into shock and I think he dies. But that's where it can go, right? It can go to that level where I don't think she was trying to murder her child, but I think he was starting to get better, because you can see he was all like playing around, and that's not what she wanted. It's not that she doesn't love her child. She loves her. She's got mental problems, and it creates this disease to where now they're harming their child in order for them to stay within need of medical support and her support. So I do think at the time she was in absolute fear of her life, but I also think that objectively you can see that who knows what would have happened next. And then afterwards, if you look at her now, oh my gosh, she's healthy. She gained a lot of weight when she's
Instagram.
4 million followers on
reality
Instagram,
show.
a reality show, but physically, immediately when you saw her in jail, I mean, she was on a normal, she gained her weight back. She's actually really pretty. I mean, her mother had just shaved her head and let her teeth fall out because she was giving her medication she didn't need. And this poor girl, I mean, I couldn't imagine her self-esteem then. And now that she's healthy and she's vibrant. And so we wish her the absolute best. And I think this is another one of those stories we're hoping that the system becomes more aware of these things, being sensitive to like our Maya Kowalski story of making sure we're not overzealously accusing people of this Munchausen syndrome. But this is one where the complete opposite spectrum. There was clear Munchausen syndrome for a long time and nobody ever questioned it. And then the ultimate result was she had to take things into her own hands. And that is exactly what Gypsy Rose said. And I do believe that. She said, they go, why didn't you ever just tell anybody? Like when you're at the doctor's office. And she goes, my mother had made it clear to everybody that I wasn't competent, that I was dumb, that she had to make all the decisions for me. So she goes, I never would have believed anybody was going to believe me. And that's true. Like it's exactly what her mother had done.
I do believe that the empathy for Gypsy, though, was to the detriment of Nick Godejohn. I still firmly believe that. And I wanted to ask a question. It says that that Godejohn's reading ability is at a 4th grade level, and the Miranda rights were written at a 6th grade level. So how would have Godejohn understood his rights? Wouldn't he have had trouble?
And that could be also part of this appeal. That could be also grounds for the fact that his attorney should have argued that did they believe that his confession was knowingly involuntary. So the only thing about your rights, when people read you your Miranda rights, it's so before they have to be said, before they're going to put you in custody and ask you questions that can be used against you. So it could have helped with his confession being thrown out. Based on that, thank you guys so much for tuning in to Legal Candy. Please join us next week. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please reach out to us. Thank you guys. Very good. You did good too. Coming in there. She gave me some more.
Times, but
What? Oh, listen to you. What? I said good job. You were CPC. Yes.
You were snoring a little bit.
It was hilarious.
Oh my God, I know. I was like, she was like walking around. I saw you looking at her walking around. Yes. Okay.
Now you can be our Legal Candy correspondent. Right?
Oh yeah.
And me, Kelly,
Yes. Especially if you like doing it.
All we ever do is talk about it anyway.
I know.
All we ever do is talk
Especially
about
when we
Legal
get some
Candy.
good. Especially when we get some good
real
stuff.
good things.
Yay.
Did I sound okay?
You
on the
sound
radio?
You're gonna hear.
Very,
We're gonna hear when it
very-
comes back in.
Very intelligent and extremely.
Look, we got a
sound
comment.
perspective.
Billy Spooner says, I'm really learning a lot listening to your program on Tan Talk. This is our first fan.
And first comment for you. Oh, gee. Good girl.
John, my friend, he said, good.
And that's why I have the PowerPoint presentation for all of us to send this to all of our friends to get them all to listen. And
Yes.
we have to go to the oyster roast. But I have
My
can I
own-
pay
my
$350 for
Just
you?
wait, yes. My family was like, where is it? And I go, we haven't really done a launch yet because
Not our
we